a playlist original.
Jack is dead, my friend. You can call me Joker.
What are you?
I'm Batman. Where does he get those wonderful toys? Wait till they get a load of me.
Only one will claim the night. Rated PG-13. Now playing.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your host, Gaius and Jackson. Big anniversary episode that we've actually been talking about for a really long time. We're celebrating the 35th anniversary of Batman, which actually was on June 23rd. A lot of people on X and Instagram and TikTok, out of all the anniversaries I've seen recently, probably I've seen the most posted about that particular anniversary. There was a lot of nostalgia attached to the anniversary for a lot of people. A lot of people who are lucky enough to see it and experience the summer of 1989 when this came out. And actually, this one guy on X wrote a really detailed story that I took a little bit from that I'll probably share on here. That was it sounded so cool to actually be in that element when this movie came out, because however people may have felt about it's story wise and how they feel about it now, like in the wake of like Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, which a lot of people love. It was a very seminal movie for comic book films and also just big Hollywood blockbusters in terms of how they were marketed and presented to the masses. There are a lot of people that work in the industry that still claim that this is one of the best, at least in the top 5 best marketed movies that they've ever seen. So, and it's one of those things that you had to be there for. And even hearing about it like secondhand is kind of fun because it seems like it was a really cool thing to get involved in Batmania in 1989.
It's the story of my life, right? I've never seen it before, so I had
yeah. So like even the build up, like even beginning in like maybe November, October 1988, when you're hearing about like casting and all this stuff too, and like that had its share of people who were upset at first, and then certain people won fans over once they saw the movie. But they said Batmania was pretty huge all the way leading up to this, and it wasn't exactly at the time expected to be the hugest movie that summer. Like but as it got closer, they could tell that something was going to be different about it. And this will be interesting doing this with you, because what I tried to do with watching it this time, because I've seen it a lot.
Right.
But it's been a few years since I've actually watched it though, but I've seen it a ton because I grew up with it.
Right.
I tried to look at it not through a nostalgia lens, which is it was kind of hard because it definitely is a huge part of my childhood.
Right.
Yeah. And what I think would be cool about this conversation though is that you don't have that attachment to it, and your your seminal Batman movies are those Christopher Nolan, that Dark Knight trilogy, which is
yes.
great pieces of cinema. And so you looked at it probably from a very different way than I even looked at it now.
Naturally, yes, very much so. And I tried to lend my viewing with the perception of like how it would have been received in the 80s. Like I was keeping that in my mind. It was a little hard with it being 35 years old and with there being so much other Batman related media since then. So I'm not going to lie, it was difficult to separate those things during this viewing. And actually, eventually I kind of just gave up and I was just trying to watch it. Ignore my Alexa in the background. She's popping off here for a sec. So I can commend you for, watching this again. I know having seen it a few times might have been a little bit easier, but just to actively try and watch it with a different lens. I know how difficult that can be, and I don't have that experience with this. So good on you for attempting to do that. How was that experience? Like, did you find you were successful in that, or did you find yourself reliving that nostalgia?
It's funny to realize that we had opposite kind of, I won't say problems, but ways in how we were having to watch it, where I really, because, especially after even Batman Begins, I would say, like, when it was, once we got the whole Christopher Nolan trilogy, that really kind of summed up like what those definitive Batman movies are for me.
Right.
And I have even said that I think Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises are, no matter how much Batman media has been out there, whether it's this movie that we're talking about or Batman Returns, Batman Forever, never Batman and Robin, but it's there for some people that enjoy it. Those three are the pinnacle of how you do this character right, because it's there's a lot more development. One, Christopher Nolan cared a lot about the character of Batman and Bruce Wayne. And it's clear, and this happens. You can see it here. You can really see it in Batman Returns, which we actually talked about a long time ago on its anniversary. Tim Burton had more. He felt connected more to the villains more than the Batman character itself. And there's so much to enjoy, I think, about Batman '89. But I think I just want to get the big problem out of the way. Is I've always had an issue with the fact that Bruce Wayne Batman seems underdeveloped compared to especially compared to Jack Nicholson's Joker. But I guess you got Jack Nicholson, and he was a bigger star than Michael Keaton at the time. So
true.
I know that they beefed up the Joker's role in the script when Nicholson got attached. So I get that, but the movie is called Batman. So that's always been my issue with the movie later in life, which I didn't have this issue growing up with it. I didn't really care about the narrative issues with like Bruce Wayne not having as much character development as the Joker, and the stuff with like Vicky Vale. Didn't really care all about that when I was younger. Right. It wasn't until I got older and like had what I felt was a better example of how to do this, which was the Nolan movies, and then rewatching it with that lens. It's definitely a flawed movie, which I know might upset people listening to this, because a lot of people love it. And I still enjoy it. As pure entertainment, and I can't totally forget that it's such a huge part of my childhood growing up.
Right.
And if anything, I guess the really cool thing about it is at the time when it came out, the big examples of Batman in pop culture, at least on TV or film, especially TV, was the '60s show, which was like really cheesy and campy. And they at least wanted to do a dark Batman movie that did him justice. And I think they accomplished that overall with Batman '89, like making the character the way they think he should have been perceived as, from the comic books that they grew up reading. So there's a lot to enjoy about it. And I think I was mostly successful watching it not through a nostalgia. Now there was like some cool shots and cool moments where I was like, Definitely. It was hard for me not to recall them as like, oh, that was so cool. I remember seeing that for the first time, and it was hard not to do that, but like
story-wise, you have fun with it too.
Yeah. Story-wise, I think I did a good job looking at it as a film and like just really judging it on those merits this time. But this was the first time you watched it. I know one of your earliest things when you were on the show was when you said that you had never seen it.
Yes.
And I think I like audibly gasped on the episode when you said you had never seen it.
Correct.
So,
Merc as well. I know he's probably listening, waiting for this episode. I know he gave me grief for having not seen it.
Yeah. I know he's gonna be in pins and needles about what you thought about it and what you're gonna score it and all that stuff. But just your Cliff's Notes version for now of what you kind of thought now that you finally have seen it.
Okay.
What you thought of it overall.
I'm going to preface by saying that I was very disadvantaged in watching this in the fact that I grew up on a completely different set of Batman movies and Batman content, and that's not to say that I can separate this from that and looking at it in the context of when it came out and what previous Batman media there was before. And I got to commend Tim Burton and more so the writers, because Tim Burton obviously had probably some sway on the script and the direction of the movie, but he doesn't have the writing credit. So I don't know much about who wrote it other than the writers who get the credit for creating the figure, but very much different from the content that I had seen from like pre-80s Batman, the Adam West stuff, which I've never seen the movie, but you see clips and segments from the TV show and stuff. So at that time, I completely agree that this was revolutionary, not for just the character of Batman and comic book movies in general, which I think he was kind of riding the wave of the Superman movies from the late 70s and earlier 80s, which I think, if I understand correctly from the limited research that I've done post-watch, because I just finished it today as of recording, was one of the things that kind of helped Warner Brothers warm up to the idea of making Batman '89. So I appreciate it. We probably wouldn't have, definitely, no doubt, wouldn't have the Batman movies that I've grown up and loved today, and in the Nolan trilogy, and more recently Matt Reeves' take on the Batman, which I'm also floored with. It's funny though how And I say that knowing that this paved the way for that, yet there was still definitely some retraction with Joel Schumacher's movies in the 90s, and something that Chris Nolan didn't have to look forward to at the time that Batman Begins comes out in 2005 is that this movie is that anticipation and the Batmania, where I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you know a lot more than I have. I've only read about it. I didn't experience it. But from what I understand, when Batman Begins was coming out, comic book moviegoers and Batman movie lovers were kind of worn out by what we got most recently in the 90s, and the more reverse to the campiness and whatnot that Joel Schumacher gave. So I think that's something that would have been interesting to have lived with, is the Batmania and the fever of this movie in the 80s after not really having something this dark. So that would be something I would have loved to have kind of experienced firsthand. But again, didn't really impact my watch because I wasn't around for the anticipation of this movie. All that out of the way, I just had to preface by acknowledging that regardless of my feelings for the movie, I want people to know I appreciate for what it did at the time. Yeah. All that being said, like this day, I'm gonna rip off the Band-Aid and say that I didn't really enjoy the movie. I like aspects, I know, and I'm sure I can imagine what Merc is hearing me say, and I even feel guilty because fans of the show heard time and time again me mention my buddy Cam, who's I owe really my movie watching experiences to. He's put me on such great stuff, and he's a big fan of Tim Burton's '89 Batman. I haven't had the chance to chat with him about my thoughts on this movie yet. I guess my biggest gripes are that it didn't, and you kind of alluded to this earlier in your intro, is Batman really takes a back seat in this movie that I did not expect. I have never heard that as a complaint. I've never dove into like a review or read the synopsis of this movie, which is something I usually do. I mean, there's lots of movies I'll research beforehand, but this is always one that I stayed away from for one reason or another. So I found that really interesting. It really, and I've heard other people on the internet make this quip that it should have been called Joker, because Jack Nicholson is really center stage in this movie. And even I'd say the characters of Vicky Vale and Alexander Knox I would be curious to see the screen time stats amongst those characters and see what percentage of the movie Batman really.
That would be interesting, actually.
Right? I wish I had the time to look this up beforehand. I'm definitely interested in doing it afterwards, but I expected more Michael Keaton and more Batman. So that was kind of something that I was like, okay. And I loved Jack Nicholson's performance. He absolutely chewed up this role completely and made it his own. But that being said, I didn't like how the Joker character was written and sort of like his illustrious, flamboyant persona that I didn't ever expect. I'd seen clips, of course, like his Have You Ever Danced with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight? I've seen that scene several times. Some of his good iconic moments from this film I was familiar with, but the stuff in between, the song and dance and all that wily personality, I
kind of figured, it's funny. I kind of figured, like, so when I was watching it again, I watched it actually this morning. Like when you when we we were supposed to record this yesterday, and when you switched, I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait and watch it so it's just fresh.
Oh, nice.
My mind, right? So when I was watching it today, and it got to the museum scene, which is actually my favorite scene in the movie, though.
Okay.
And the Prince music kicked in and all that, I was like, I have a feeling that Jackson's not going to love this part.
It really threw me off.
And most people I know who are like a little younger or saw this later, that stuff does not fly too well with them. In fact, some of them think it's almost as campy as the stuff that they want to avoid.
It gave me those feelings. So I was like, this is more campy than I had been led to believe. And if you're comparing it to the 60s campiness, absolutely, it's, opposite end of the spectrum. But now this is kind of in the middle when we have Nolan's afterwards that I'm used to seeing, then that kind of adds more campiness to this in retrospect, I found.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and let me just add, it's not just the museum. It starts with the museum scene, and then it's the whole like chase and stuff after that, and that's Batmobile for the first time.
That sequence was really cool. Yeah.
But yeah, I was thinking that as soon as the song kicked in, I mean, I actually have a lot of the. I love Prince. I mean, it was one of those things too. I found out later, and I didn't know this initially, because I've always wondered, like, how did that happen?
I was wondering the same thing when I saw the credits. I was like, what is Prince's music doing here?
I guess there's a producer that worked on this movie that worked on Purple Rain, which is like it was a big movie in the 80s with Prince, and the soundtrack album.
Just a couple years before, right?
Yeah, like 84. So So in addition to that movie being a hit, the soundtrack was an even bigger hit. So I mean, it's one of the highest selling albums ever.
Right.
So I think they went to him with, oh, let's do a couple songs, and then Prince watched the movie. They met with Tim Burton,
Okay,
and then all of a sudden had this like concept album with a bunch of songs because he had watched the movie, and all the songs were like, he basically created from watching the film. And I mean, I guess this goes to show how big even just anything Batman related was. I think the soundtrack came out a week or two before the movie, and
that would have got people hype.
It was a huge hit too. It was number one in like there's a song called Bat Dance. It's not in the movie, but it's a long music video where he's dressed as like half Joker, half Batman. It's like a huge production, and that song was a hit too. But I think that just shows how anything at that point that was Batman related was going to hit, I guess.
And I don't think it's a bad idea to have incorporated, one of the biggest pop megastars of the time into the promotion of this movie. Like that's stuff we still see today. However, in execution, and even I don't know I would have felt this way if I had watched it in 89 or 90, before I was around, but I felt that was one of the few things that did date this movie for me was his music. And I'm not that familiar with Prince's music. I appreciate his, guitar playing ability. He's a master.
Yeah.
And a couple of songs I know by him I like. So, and that's, me. I'm sure Prince fans are shuddering, and I'm dating myself here, but I associate him with the 80s pop music. And so that kept me thinking that when I was trying to watch it for a Batman movie, not an 80s movie, which with big characters like Batman, I feel you can kind of get away with, where they're sort of belong in their own league, separate from the decade they're being made in. But that was one thing I was like, when those scenes are on and his music is, in the forefront, like particularly the museum scene. And I'm not sure if it was Prince's music in the parade scene towards the end. I'm guessing it was.
When he's tossing the money and all that
stuff. It also took me and Jack Nicholson's dancing around. This is not what I expected from his character. I loved him doing it. He looked like he was having a blast. And I think he played the part as it was written beautifully, but it's the writing of that Joker that I had not experienced before. And comparing it obviously to Heath and even Joaquin Phoenix, it didn't stack up for me.
Do you think like his take is a little too zany and a little less let's start a little anarchy, which compared to like Heath Ledger's is more Heath Ledger's take feels more dangerous, and maybe it's funny because I don't think Jack Nicholson throughout is campy. Like there's certainly some like darker stuff that he does, and then there's some stuff that kind of is in the middle, like when he after Batman takes his balloons that poisoned all of them.
I actually laughed.
And his right hand man, who that actor apparently it was really Jack Nicholson's right hand man too. He he wanted him to be cast in. That was like one of several stipulations that Jack Nicholson had to be in the movie. But when he just shoots him because he's pissed off,
right? Yeah.
I mean, and that's like a mix of it. That's kind of dark, but also kind of funny.
Yes.
So
which
I think
Tim Burton does beautifully in all of his movies.
And then he's just genuinely like upset, like he stole my balloons, and like he's just so mad.
Right.
I think he finds the right balance of doing both of those things. But I can see I can see how the museums especially would be off-putting.
Exactly. And that being said, just because I think he performs the character again, like as it's written well. It's my problem is like that's not my preferred interpretation of the Joker, of which there are several from comics and other movies and TV and whatnot. And that's fine. Not all of them are going to resonate with everybody. I don't even like to compare it to Heath Ledger's. Naturally, that feels like what you should do. You're comparing two different performances of the same character.
It's hard not to, I think.
Right. I mean, it is, but like ultimately, I understand that these are completely two same character, but wildly different interpretations from different universes. They really only share the same name and arch nemesis and Batman. There's not really much else grounding the character together, I don't think. So it's kind of a weird thing to compare, but again, it's like what you do. So I would never say like, Heath Ledger gives my favorite version of the Joker that we've seen, but it's like apples to oranges. They're very, very different products that we're comparing, and I get that.
I've always said, even though I think Jack Nicholson is very good, and it feels like the Joker by way of Jack Nicholson. Like it still feels like him, and that's not a detriment. I mean, it works. And to his credit, you said it looks like he was having fun. He did, and he loved playing that part. And they said the one thing that is good about Jack Nicholson is it might be hard to get him sometimes, but they said that he is probably the biggest supporter of a director's vision once he talks.
Nice. That's what you want in an actor.
So Tim Burton was pretty young when he got Batman. He was in his 20s, and he said once he talked to Tim Burton, Jack Nicholson had a discussion with him. He saw what his vision was and did everything he could to make sure that like he was listened to. So like he's the bigger actor on set. He could easily maybe boss him around if he wanted to.
Totally.
But he believed in what Tim Burton was doing, and like he had a bigger idea of what the movie was going to be more so than anyone, because he did take a pay cut, but he also took a massive back end deal for this movie.
Yeah, I read that.
That wasn't just the film itself. It was like Batman related stuff like down the line that he got paid for. So like a lot of people were like, Jack Nicholson got really rich on this movie.
Well, on that note, just a fun fact. So I read that he, took box office percentage and, like you said, just other, like, merch and stuff related to the success of the movie, which netted him at the time, like roughly 60 million, which adjusted for inflation, I just read was somewhere in the vein of like in the 140 millions.
Which is crazy.
Today. That is bonkers.
I mean, he is the king of like, taking that kind of deal. I mean, Keanu Reeves did a similar thing with The Matrix and all that. So like sometimes when actors believe in something, they're like, oh, I think this is going to be huge. And and he clearly did. And there, everyone's always been like, he gets top billing over Michael Keaton, but he was Jack Nicholson, and he is Jack Nicholson. So he was going to get Nicholson's last name was going to be ahead of Keaton's on the marquee. But I do agree with you, which has always been my biggest problem with the movie, is you don't get to know a lot about Bruce Wayne outside of the basics of his parents were murdered when he was a kid. And then the movie changes from the comic book who killed his parents. I mean, it's not Jack Napier or this version of the Joker or the Joker period. That doesn't happen in the comic books at all. That was a Tim Burton change. And I actually think for the movie, it makes sense because it gives more of a personal connection to those two characters and what that kind of leads to. I honestly don't know if comic fans were like pissed at the time with that change, but it doesn't seem too huge that it would cause an issue.
You can play around with comic origins a lot. It's not like it's not been done before this or afterwards, and some changes might be more contentious. I can see this one having like striking a chord with like hardcore comic fans, maybe some of the older members in the audience when this came out or since. I think it works for me I say I'm a Batman fan. When people ask me like who's my favorite superhero, this is who I defer to, but like I'm not a comic book reader or lover, so I can't really say that. Like my only love for Batman comes from like the films. So like I didn't really find that I realized that they were switching things up when that happened. My complaint about that, I would say, is like how late in the film Batman makes that connection and how it feels like their vendetta is already established well before that connection is made. And on that note, like I only know what I know about the Batman comics from friends and like my little research that I've done. And what I appreciate, even in the Nolan films, I found like there wasn't a lot of like detective Batman work, which is what I really loved about Matt Reeves' version. But this one felt like the detective side of Batman was more or less not present at all. We do see him kind of contemplating in his lair a couple times, but most of the time, and I read this in a review, not necessarily a criticism, but that he's more reactive to crime and what's going on than proactive, trying to actively solve it himself. I found what I really didn't like about how the character of Batman is handled beyond his limited screen presence is how much he's invested in Vicky Vale, like a more or less almost a one night stand. Essentially.
All right. Let's get that out of the way because that's my other problem with the movie. And this is nothing against Kim Basinger, who is actually does her job well in the movie, and she's actually gorgeous too. Like the second time you see her at the Bruce Wayne's like event towards the beginning of the movie, where she's like in that white dress, she looks like old Hollywood.
Yeah,
beautiful.
True.
Like
that.
She looks great, and I think, and also at the time when these movies were coming out, the women in these movies unfortunately were the damsels in distress, and that's what. That's the purpose that she serves. I don't know what the issue was screenplay wise with that relationship, because it's very rushed, and I don't buy the connection between the two of them, even though Michael Keaton and her have decent chemistry. I think it's just because they are just both good actors and they made what they had work.
Yes.
But the relationship I don't buy, because like you said, it was basically a one night stand, and she becomes very obsessive like following him around and trying to figure out what I mean. He does like lie to her about having to leave town, but you find out later that's because he's gonna go visit where his parents were killed and like leave the roses and all that stuff there. So that's why he lied to her. Right. But like, why would she even really care right? That like, and unless she's just like, there was no room for even the whole jilted like one night stand angle either. Where why is she so concerned with what he's doing? Like, oh, whatever but what the movie doesn't do is like what the other movies have done. They don't really play up him being a billionaire playboy. He's just rich.
I agree. Yes,
he's not. So I would kind of understand maybe if they played up the playboy angle, if she was kind of like annoyed by being lied to and all that. But that doesn't even really happen either. And she has no indication either that she thinks he's Batman. She realizes that later when she finds out that his parents.
When Alfred outs him. I thought that was another. There
were two things when Knox finally tells her because she tells him to look up that street that he was on, that Bruce Wayne was on, and then Knox tells her that that's where his parents were killed. And then he says something along the lines like, "What would that do to a kid who like saw something like that?" Right. And I think she realizes then there's more to that. That could be what he's hiding.
And it's the same alley that when he's rescues her from the museum. That's where they end up, right? It's the same alley. Yeah.
So I understood at least movie wise that she figures it out because I mean she is a journalist, I guess, so she should be on top of that.
Yeah.
They actually, to your credit though, they do make fun of Alfred bringing her into the back.
Do they?
And Batman Returns.
Okay.
Because everyone thinks like a lot of fans think that is a huge violation of trust because like Alfred is supposed to be like his right hand man, like keeping this big secret. But one of the writers, I think Sam Hamm, who takes credit for a lot of the movie, but the one thing that he won't take credit for is changing who killed Batman's parents in the movie and this whole scene with Vicky Vale and Alfred letting her into the Batcave. He's like, I didn't write that. Apparently, they were late in the schedule. It was rushed. They had to wrap up that relationship. I guess let it be known that she knew that his secret, right? So there was no real scene leading up to that. Maybe I don't even know if we needed a scene with her storming in and like telling Alfred that she knows, like whatever.
That's what I was going to ask. So what does she do off camera? Just interrogate Alfred and say, I have a hunch that he's Batman. You might as well just take me to him. And he's like, oh, okay. I want them to be together anyway. So because that's how it came across.
Because what you're seeing throughout the movie is Alfred, for some reason, even though I think he met her once, is
and
ride or die for her.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, if you don't marry her, I will.
He says like he is just like saying how special she is, and I would have understood that relationship if they had more scenes together, or if they do have. No, they didn't really have a lot of scenes together. But they have like enough, but like not enough to really sell that relationship for what it is. Now I was torn watching it because I thought she was good. I think she has a lot to do, and like her stuff with him is good. I thought her stuff with Jack Nicholson was fun too because like it seems like they enjoyed that kind of playing off each other a little bit. But there's not much to the character either. Like at least their relationship.
Especially her intro when she says that she comes to Gotham because she enjoys Knox's journalism and she likes bats. I thought that was supposed to be like a hidden thing. Like she already had a hunch beforehand and she was using that as cover. But when that doesn't happen and that is kind of like what she tells Knox for why she's in Gotham in the first place, I was like, that is very lackluster to me. Not that I expect. I don't know what I expected. But anyway, I want to back up for a sec. I'm glad you share this criticism with me.
Oh, yeah.
The character of Vicky Vale, not
second biggest gripe.
Right. And it's not, again, I don't blame it on Kim Basinger either. It's just the writing of the character, why she's such a big force in the movie. I suppose I lend that to, it being the 80s and that, there needed to be, love interests were very much in the spotlight in this era in film, especially, it lends to a very typical hero and like leading lady persona or dynamic, which was more common. What else was I going to say? I brought this back for a reason. I think I lost my other train of thought there.
She wasn't even the first girl cast in that role. Sean Young was cast.
Okay.
And Sean Young was in Blade Runner and a few other movies in the 80s. She's in the original Dune. There was a scene that was written and they were filming, or she was training for it, where they were supposed to be riding horses on Wayne Manor, and Sean Young severely hurt her back, and they had to replace her. So she had already been Sean Young had already been cast. She had already done like a lot of read-throughs with the cast. She had met all the went to Pinewood Studios in London. Like she was Vicky Vale. She got hurt, and they were like, "Hey, like we need to find someone last minute to do this." And Kim Basinger didn't have a lot of time to make a decision. They were like, "Hey, this is where we're at. We're like damage. Like this is like we're doing damage control." One of the producers was really familiar with her. Would you like to come in and not even read? Would you like to just come in and do it? We need to get you on a plane to London tonight. And then you need to
that's
just
nice.
Start filming. So she said she got thrusted into this very last minute, but she was more than happy to do it because she said by the time she got to London that like, and they're on set and she's working with Tim Burton, she was like, she even felt like, oh, I'm doing something much bigger than I've ever done before.
Right.
And this is like
fish out of water, probably.
So this will be, I'm happy to have this, opportunity.
Yeah.
But I kind of wonder, and I know that some of the cast, I actually found this out from watching another documentary about Batman a month or two ago that was airing on Vice, and the cast, from what I understand, at least according to Sean Young, did not particularly love her. Jack Nicholson didn't really like her a lot. Michael Keaton didn't really vibe with her either, but that's who they cast, so they were just kind of like working with it. And some of the producers on that documentary were jokingly like, well, how did everyone feel when she couldn't do the movie? And they were just kind of like, well, they were kind of happy to be rid of her, and I was like,
so sinister.
They were trying not to say. I mean, Sean Young has another stupid audition story for Batman Returns where she dresses up as Catwoman to audition and goes into the executive office, and like that's how she tried to audition. And they were like, "Oh, you're crazy! Like, go home."
Oh boy.
And another one considered too was Michelle Pfeiffer was briefly considered to play Vicky Vale.
I read that they were dating at the time, her and Michael Keaton, right? Yeah.
So, and then that didn't work out, but she ended up in Batman Returns.
Right.
Anyway,
I remember my point from earlier, and this is harkening back to the whole how quick their relationship is kind of forced in the movie. And I know that we've shared the complaint before, where like, a couple in a movie will sleep together one time, and then all of a sudden they're in love, and I will do anything for you. And like that was a sentiment that I really associate with like this older era of filmmaking, like 70s and 80s, and I can kind of reconcile that relationship in this movie because of like the era that it was made. And I see like, I don't think a Playboy in the 80s is really quite what it would be like by the time the Nolan films come around. Certainly not. Like, I'm curious to know when in like the Batman history that becomes like such a big characteristic of Bruce Wayne, because I can't imagine in the 40s and 50s when the comics were exploding onto the scene that meant quite what it does in the later decades. So I'm curious if that was an evolving portrait or characteristic of Bruce Wayne as the Batman progressed through the years, because I can't imagine. I'd say he's more of a playboy in this than I would imagine he would be in like 40s comics or even the Adam West show. But again, I don't really have any experience in that arena. But I guess I can forgive the movie for not spotlighting that part of his character. So it wasn't a huge gripe to me, although it did feel like, again, having been a fan and getting used to like how Batman's portrayed in the Nolan movies, like it was a part of his character that was missing, sort of like the detective angle. So, but anyway, it's not. I
think you're right to say that he's more reactive. I think some of the producers said that his version of Batman seemed like he's more like introspective and not. And they actually made a good comment, which I actually agree with, because like we said, there was a big debate about Michael Keaton when he got cast, because at the time, Beetlejuice had come out right before this, and he was more known for doing comedic roles rather than serious ones. But he did do a movie called Clean and Sober that someone else on this film worked on, and they were like, he can be a very good dramatic actor. He played like an alcoholic in the movie. So like they were like he could be a good dramatic actor. And then Tim Burton made a good point about his facial features. They said that Michael Keaton's eyes looks like he's hiding something, and and just knowing that, and then watching it, his face is very, and it's all in his eyes. Where it does seem like he is not totally there. Like there is something that he's keeping, whatever that secret might be, and like there's a sense of like menace, but you still feel like, he's not going to hurt you per se, but there's some darkness there that I think. Ended up working for him, which is why a lot of people consider him to be their favorite Batman even today. I mean, there's always a debate about like some of the actors are better Bruce Waynes but not good Batman, and some
it's
of
like a Peter Parker Spider-Man debate.
I mean, seeing him. I mean, I'm sure you kind of heard the whole hype around him now because, like,
Yep.
you know, a lot of people do love him in this role. But even given the limited amount of screen time, what did you think of him in the part?
I've always been a big fan of Michael Keaton. I have really nothing bad to say about any of his performances that I've seen. I do think he is like geniusly funny. I think he's a great dramatic actor too. Like I'd cite like the other guys in Birdman as some of my favorite performances of his on either side of the comedy and drama perspective. So I've always loved him. I don't know how much, if I've seen anything earlier than him, other than Beetlejuice, aside from his Batman role. As far as he shapes up as Bruce Wayne Batman, I don't fault his performance. I don't think he was a standout in this role for me. Like I certainly don't think he compares to Bale, but again, I understand I'm coming at this with a biased lens, so that's.
I know you ripping all the band-aids off it.
Yeah, I don't feel like he just does much with the role, or that he's not given much to do with it beyond like he kind of. I think his biggest conflict is how he's going to address that he is Batman to Vicky Vale more so than later.
I actually like that scene.
Yeah, no, it's fun. Yeah.
Like I remember as a kid not getting it totally because there's a lot going on in that scene.
Yes,
it's something I appreciate more being older. And even though I know you mentioned earlier that you don't like that it gets introduced too late in the movie that Jack Napier was the one that killed his parents, but I do like screenplay wise how he realizes that by him saying that to him.
Yes, like, his call sign. Yeah, I do like that too.
Because you actually can see the genuine shock in Michael Keaton's face when he hears it.
Yes,
and I do like that's how he figures it out. But yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think he's a lot of people's favorite Batman, maybe because he was their first dark Batman.
That's what I would chop that up to be.
And he is convincing in the suit, and like he doesn't like it doesn't seem like like I don't buy it. Like he is commanding it as in the role as far as like being in the costume, and the voice is great. It's not like, you know, it's different from Christian Bale's and it's different from Val Kilmer's and all that. Like
apparently he started the whole trend of going with like a lower tone voice in the for the Bat voice, which I thought was really cool. Did not know that about him in this movie. Because he agreed that he wanted to according to IMDb anyway, he was sort of like a logic freak and thought it was too easy to make the connections between Bruce Wayne and Batman. So this was his compromise, was by speaking a different pitch, which I thought was genius. And we see how that has held in future interpretations of the character. So props to him for cementing that iconic characteristic in Batman with like the OG Bat voice. I thought that was great. I want to ask you something about more like the character of Batman than Bruce Wayne, because I have my gripes with how Bruce Wayne is portrayed compared to other interpretations. But one thing that I thought, I don't really know how I think about it. I think if I were to flip a coin, it would land on like negative, but I could be swayed. And that is how like the ambiguity about Batman's relationship with Gotham and how long he's been playing or been in the role of Batman. What did you think about? Because I thought it was fairly ambiguous. We don't really get much, at least nothing that I caught, about how long he's been doing it or even his motivations, other than we know his parents were killed. I feel like that's drawn from the comics more than explained in the movie. Did you think the ambiguity about how long he's been Batman and his relationship with Gotham a strength in the movie, a weakness, or did you find it was neutral?
Well, that's funny because I was going to ask you that too, because I think what there are some benefits and maybe disadvantages to both of these things, but a part of me likes that this movie isn't a traditional like origin story. Like you don't.
I was expecting that, so I was.
You don't really learn that how he becomes Batman, and I guess the Batman had a similar approach where like the Batman was, you know, the start of him in Matt Reeves' movie is he's already Batman, and it's clear in that movie that it's early. In him becoming Batman.
First couple of years,
I just assume based on how the police are reacting to him and how journalists are writing about him, like no one really buys Knox's Batman stories either, that it's still fairly early, in the run. But you don't really get the impression of like when exactly he started, whether it was like a few months ago or a year or I think some of these movies get bogged down by too much origin, which is why I don't really necessarily care that they didn't really give us an origin story here.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But you know, I say that as someone who loves Batman Begins because you get full details on how he learned how to fight, all his training, how he even got his Tumbler Batmobile, how like all the stuff that he needed to be
love
Batman.
That strengthens the Dark Knight for me.
So while it's cool that we see his Batmobile here, we don't really know how he put it together or how he got it.
Right.
I love the whole Batwing stuff towards the end, but we don't know how he got that or how he was able to.
Not everything needs an explanation, I guess, but I tend to enjoy that more.
But there's no real information about how he became so proficient with all his gadgets and all that stuff too. And like,
right.
I think there is something that could be missing there by not knowing how he did it. But I'm guessing if I'm thinking about it, if it was 1989 and I already have like all the Batman knowledge, I guess I wouldn't necessarily need a full explanation for why all this is happening. But I do believe, I agree with you that it does seem ambiguous as to when this is in his career as protecting Gotham City. And like, what I did like about it, I do love the whole he's almost like a urban legend almost in Gotham City in this movie.
I like that approach. Yeah.
I thought that was cool.
Reeves does that well too.
Yeah. And I love that, the police don't trust him, which is, I enjoyed that part of it too. And I think they handled that part well. I think it also I'm not going to go all the way to the end yet, but I do think with how they, the thing with the bat signal at the end and him becoming like a savior to Gotham City, I think that works really well because because of how they are reacting to him at the beginning of the movie compared to how they perceive him by the end of it. That is some
good development. I'll give his story credit for that.
But I do think there's something missing from not having a little bit more of a backstory for him. I think this movie was made. It seems like, and I could be wrong if anyone wants to correct me that's listening, but like it seemed like it was made primarily for Batman fans, and like they would already know what they need to know.
Exactly, I agree.
And that's how that worked out. I mean, what do you think that it is a disadvantage that it doesn't have more of an origin, that you don't really know when this takes place in his tenure as Batman, I guess?
I'll put it this way. I'm not really made my mind up yet in relation to this movie. I definitely agree. You could just plop the audience into the middle of a Batman story and not address how long he's been doing it, and that could work out fine. I like a little bit of like trial and error and some light shed on how long other interpretations of Batman have been at it. Like we see pretty in-depth origin in Batman Begins. That works great for the Nolan trilogy. Might not have worked great in this movie. I think, again, it's great in Reeves' story, how he's showing a very junior Batman, kind of coming of age. And this one, I think it's fine, but I'm sort of kind of wondering I left the viewing wondering if I was watching this as a non-Batman audience or Batman fan, as an audience member back then. And I agree to your point. This was made by comic lovers who like are trusting the audience, who have done their research or to be familiar with, the core components of Batman. But if I'm watching this as a first time viewer, never seen any Batman content before, I would find myself wondering, okay, so what is his real motivation for doing this? We kind of see him before the Joker kind of takes the scene. He's kind of beating on petty criminals in a sense.
At the start of the movie. Yeah.
And at the end, like, I think this is contrasted by what he says when Kim Basinger's character, when Vicky Vale asks him why he feels he needs to do this. And he says, because no one can. I feel like he doesn't really get his purpose.
Because no one else will. It's kind of what he says.
Because no one else will,
Yeah.
And I guess I think maybe some trial and error would have went a long way, but it wasn't like by any means the biggest. I'm more like bringing it up because it was an expectation I had in the movie, which was a mistake on my behalf. Don't go in things you haven't seen with expectations. And
it was kind of our fault. I mean, well, at least my fault. To be like, this is such a huge movie.
And the other Batman movies I've seen address his beginning, so that's kind of I think why I was expecting that to be in there. But I was just curious about what you thought, or if other people thought it was something that they would have expected from the character or not. So I'm kind of like torn. I just feel like I feel like he really comes into himself once the Joker comes around.
Like I think aspects of it worked, and maybe some aspects of it might be a detriment. I mean, like I said, I do like the whole like urban legend aspect of it. Like even having those two petty criminals that like robbed that family, having them just sit there and talk about it as like he was like a ghost or something like that they don't know is real. And I do love like the images in the background while they're talking about it. When he's like he lowers like in the background. Like, I thought that was really cool. And then the first time you actually see him, when he just like when they see him, like when that's not the first time the audience sees him full out as well. And there's a lot that can be good about that. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it seems like his motivations aren't quite clear if you're a casual moviegoer.
Right.
But if you're a fan of Batman, you understand that like, oh, his parents were gunned down and like, he's taking on this like job as a vigilante because of that. You don't really get the sense of like the why in here. I mean, I guess they probably were like, yo, I mean, his parents got killed, so that's the why. That's all you need to know. But that wouldn't motivate a lot of us to do that. So so like having a little bit more of a motivation or more of a reason or something more in the screenplay to really press that a bit more would probably.
I think would have elevated the script for me. Yeah.
Because I mean, other than the fact that like Jack Napier is a criminal, I mean, that's the only reason why Batman even goes to the Access chemical plant, because he hears or Alfred overhears Commissioner Gordon talking about how, you know, something's going down there. He has no real connection to him until he finds out later that, like, you know, that's the guy that killed my parents.
Right.
My buddy a long time ago used to think that he realized it when he was like holding him before he like let him go into the chemicals, but like he doesn't realize it there. I mean, I think he just honestly lost his grip and he fell.
Right.
But there are other people that read more than that scene, like, oh, there's something in his eyes. He looks like he realized it right there. That's him. I was like, no, because later in the movie, when he says what he says to him, that's when he realizes it. And
yeah, we see his realization on his face later. Yeah.
So like it seems like just Batman is just there to like knock down all this criminal activity that he happens to be hearing about. But you're right, we don't really see a lot of the detective side of it. I mean, it's, you know,
sort of, he kind of it's a happy coincidence that he decided to say that line to him at that time. Bruce might not even have been there if anything else, you know, had to happen. And then does he ever make that connection? That's anybody's guess. That's speculative. But I think like if there was a little clue, something for Batman to kind of like follow along for himself before he just happens to make that connection. Like if he was really motivated to find out who the Joker was instead of maybe just like stopping him, I think that would have been an interesting angle for this movie to take. If he had an inkling that he was related to his parents' death or something, and then to find out he was the actual gunman, that would have gone a long way for me rather than, you know, happenstance kind of making that connection.
And also I could tell, I don't think the Joker realizes he's Bruce Wayne, right? Because he's just like, I mean, I know towards the end, like there's the whole like he says you killed my parents, and then he's like, what? And then he's just kind of like, yeah, I was a kid when I killed your parents. I don't even know if he realizes that is Bruce Wayne.
Right. I'm not sure he does either.
To be fair, I found out for this that the third act, which is like all the stuff probably that happens after the Batwing crashes, everything in the cathedral, a lot of that stuff that from there on was very last minute. They kind of Jack Nicholson and the producers saw the Phantom of the Opera, and they were like, "Oh, it'd be really cool to have like a big like sequence in like a kind of cathedral setting like that." Okay. So a lot of that was kind of put together last minute, and I guess knowing that, I mean, some of the dialogue you could tell. I think there would have been a nice benefit to Joker Jack Napier realizing like that he killed Bruce Wayne's parents,
right?
Because even Batman saying that back to him right before he hits him in the face, I don't even think that was enough for him to realize that, oh, that's Bruce Wayne. I think he just like, or maybe it doesn't matter. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think like it would have been a nice little touch if he realized that he killed Bruce Wayne's parents.
More of an opportunity to Joker
and that he's Batman.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like one of those things that's kind of thrown together, I guess.
Yeah. One thing, another couple characters I kind of want to bring up that I found underwhelming and was surprised was Commissioner Gordon and Harvey Dent. I felt had like very little to no development.
That's a hard one because you got the Gary Oldman Gordon, right, which is fully fleshed out and a very developed character, probably one of the best characters across all three movies,
definitely
of Nolan's movies. Doesn't really have a lot to do.
I was surprised at the emphasis that's given on those characters and other interpretations. Even again, to bring it up, Matt Reeves, like Commissioner Gordon, central character. I don't know about so much of the development in the sense that he comes to trust and rely on Batman more in that one movie. I feel like Dent in this at least is just his primary concern is that the second 100th parade thing, is happening. It's happening no matter what. Every time we see him, he's addressing that, and I just thought like there's no pressure on him to find out who Batman is to stop the crimes. He's just more reacting to what Joker's doing to the city and trying to instill in people that it's not going to affect the bicentennial parade. It's like I just expected more out of that central character.
And I think the intention with Billy D. Williams, which is a interesting casting choice.
Yeah, what do I know that name from? I thought I recognized him.
He's Landau Calrissian in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Yeah,
of course.
So like he was pretty big in the 70s and 80s. So I mean, I get casting him in the role. You could tell. I mean, from what I understand, that there might have been talk of maybe bringing him back for the sequel. They did not. Billy D. Williams also has said that he didn't think Tim Burton was too enthused that he was cast. Like he was just, it wasn't his choice.
Okay.
But it seemed like a character that was thrown in for comic book fans to be like, oh, that's Harvey Dent. So they could just like, oh, like he'll eventually become Two-Face, like that kind of like thing a bit.
Right.
But yeah, I can see why you'd be underwhelmed because he doesn't really have a lot to do. I don't mind the Gordon stuff though. Like this version of Gordon is he's secondary and it's fine. But I can see like if your first exposure was like the Nolan movies where that character plays such an important role, even in the development of even especially with Bruce Wayne as a young boy too. That relationship starts there after his parents are killed in Nolan's movies and concludes in a really significant way by the time the Dark Knight Rises in. So yeah, I mean that this Commissioner Gordon is not that.
No, there's I expected collaboration amongst them up until the bat signal at the end. There's really not much tying them together, if any, if I remember correctly, because I split this into two days. And I don't remember anything from the first half that I saw that led me to believe that they were collaborating in any way.
It's very contentious until the Joker is killed at the end of the movie. So like they're also trying to hide the fact that a Batman exists, like because they got
too much to worry about.
Because the scene after the Access Chemical stuff, and like one of the police officers like, who is that guy? And he's like, well, I don't know, but until we figure it out, we got to keep a lid on it. So they don't want anyone to know that they even are aware that there is a giant Batman fighting crime in their city.
You just mentioned something that sparked a light bulb in me. I can't believe this is one of my core, I guess, contentions with the movie and the Batman character, and I can't believe I let 50 minutes go by before addressing it. And like one of the few things, if you weren't familiar with Batman, is one of those universal parts of that character, at least I thought, certainly in the comics from what I know and in the Nolan verse, is that he doesn't kill people, but oh my God, does he ever kill people? Like not necessarily directly, but he blows up the Access Chemical plant right in front, like probably like 20 guys shooting at him, and he drops this little cannonball bomb, and then the whole thing is going up. Like that was very much, I was like, I did not expect that. Even before that, like he indirectly kills the Joker as well after, and then I don't know if you were waiting to get to the end before that. And then a couple other Joker henchmen too. Like he throws down the cathedral.
Oh, the guy, the bell. Yeah.
Which I get, like
that guy was kicking his ass though, dude.
Yeah, he was. But I thought this is breaking Batman continuity big time. That's something that he does not believe in doing.
Yeah, I know a lot of people bring that up, and I'm not big enough a Batman fan, comic book wise,
like
to know if like to know if that is still a thing. I know a lot of people mention it, and which is why there's certain like interpretations of it where they don't show him actually killing someone,
right?
But I agree with you. There's definitely some dead people in this movie, for sure.
I just found it surprising. I didn't necessarily care. It's one of those qualities of Batman that I don't really like about him. I'm like, you're a criminal, or you're a vigilante who beats up and brings criminals to their knees. Like if you kill a few, whatever. I always found that kind of be a lame part of him, if I'm being honest. So it didn't bother me in this movie, but I was like,
no.
I feel like this would be one of those things. If you're right, and this was made by people for Batman fans that kind of know their homework, this would be a red flag, I think.
Yeah,
wasn't for me, but yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Because there's definitely some that he's directly responsible for some deaths.
Yeah.
I want to assess something at the beginning, just because I think it showcases the score a lot, which is good throughout, but
I agree.
I want to know what you thought when because the opening title sequence, which is what they call like the Batman March, which like opens the movie.
Right.
For a long time, Danny Elfman's music was so synonymous with this. At least in movies and all that I was really concerned. The one thing I was concerned about when Nolan did his movies, and I know Hans Zimmer and stuff was attached on the Nolan score. Even knowing that, I was like, oh, I don't know if they could top any of the music they Elfman did in Batman. And I will say that the music in Nolan's movies it's good. It's really good in a different way. But even watching it for this, even at the start of the movie, I like cranked up my surround sound like all the way up during that opening Batman march because that music is so very good.
It is very iconic too. I know they've used it in one of the better received animated Batman movies, or maybe
and then animated series too.
Yeah, animated series, and it's awesome. That's where I've heard it before. And then Cam was always telling me, like, he'd even put it on once and showed me. He goes, "This is the score, the main theme for Batman '89." I'm like, "Yeah, this is awesome." Having no context to the movie, but it is a damn good score. I'll give it that. And it was one of the consistent things throughout until the soundtrack would come along and take me out of it.
So tell the Prince up. But no, Danny Elfman's music, and I know that I guess when Burton really wanted him, and the producers like didn't understand how Danny Elfman's mind worked, and they were like, "Oh, this is not working." And Danny Elfman said that he could tell, like he could almost picture a thought bubble above one of the producers' heads. They were like, "What other composer can we get for this movie?" And then Burton was like, "You know what? Like, stop explaining yourself and just play the march. Just play the march." And then that's what he played for them. And then they were like, "Oh, this is definitely what the music should be." And now it's so like it's such a part of like the Batman DNA now. Like a lot of people equate Elfman's score with Batman in general. I mean, it is the music is so good that I'm surprised that it didn't get any like awards left. Like I think the music is that good that it probably should have. I know the movie won Best Art Direction, Best Art Direction Oscar.
I was going to go check its other nominations, if any.
But like the fact that the score gets like got no love like that, seems crazy to me. I know there's some flaws in the movie for sure, but the score is not one of them. I thought
definitely not.
A beautiful piece of music throughout the entire movie, and it has different themes too. You have the Batman march, you have like stuff for the more quiet moments with Vicky Vale and Bruce Wayne. I think the score at the end, which is like a combination of the march and just like probably all the themes for the movie, where after they do the whole thing with the signal and it kind of goes up the buildings and stuff, and it's the last shot of him watching the bat signal.
Really good moment too.
That part of the score is really good too. I'm surprised they didn't get much love.
As far as I can tell, it won the only Oscar it was nominated for on IMDb here. So not even a nomination for that score is a shame. It is really one of the better parts. That and Nicholson's performance, although I didn't care for the character, I know that sounds contradictory, were among my favorite parts of the movie. And some of the shots of Batman were pretty cool too.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I was like Jackson, what did you like about the movie? But I think you already just named everything that you enjoyed. Were there any scenes that you thought were like good that stood out for you when you were watching it?
It's hard, like, as I'd seen like the highlight reel of this movie over the years, so I was familiar with a lot of some of the moments. I guess Joker's death scene I think is pretty cool. How he kind of comes back from off. I saw him go down before. I just didn't really know what had happened before that. I thought maybe like once Batman pushes him through or punches him in the face and he falls over the rail, I thought that was it. But then for him to still be hanging on and then almost get away by Chopper and then be tugged down, I thought was kind of cool, in a way for Batman not to be like directly responsible.
Directly responsible for doing it. Like, nah, it's a statue.
I thought the Batwing, I mean, I'm giving this movie credit, it came out in the 80s and I love practical
I think it looks cool
effects.
for 89. Like
89, like I'll say the effects are cool for the time. I think they're outdated by today's standards, but I thought it was impressive, let alone never mind them, being surpassed by better technology in the 35 years since. It's impressive to see what they were able to do with those Batwing shots for 88, 89. I thought that was well done. Only because you brought it up,
I do love, and one of my best friends loves this scene, even though he's like, the scene is such a flex and unnecessary, but like it's when he goes above the clouds and then the Batwing is just like in the moon. There's no real reason for that to happen other than
it's pure 80s.
But also just I'm sure the audience went crazy for that in 1989, like in the theater. So I was like, yeah, it is a purely like flex moment for no reason. Yes. Like, let's just like do it.
Cool effect shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And also with the score too, like that whole sequence is really well done. And for 89 looks good. I mean,
I have no doubt if I was a young 80s or 90s audience member, I would have cheered at that moment. But like looking at it now, I was like, I kind of gave it like a playful laugh. I was like, this is cheese. Like it's kind of funny, but and then one thing one scene I was looking forward to that I thought came across a little it was a standout. To answer your question, it was a scene that I'm thinking about afterwards, but didn't really go down quite the way that I thought it would, and maybe to me at least didn't come across the way I think the filmmakers intended. Is when I think it's their first encounter, when Bruce first meets Jack Napier, like all done up, when he's over there talking to Vicky Vale and Joker kind of crashes the party, him and his boombox, and then he grabs the fire poker and he goes, "You want to get nuts?" So I thought I actually laughed at that scene, like in a way I didn't think I was. So I thought that was kind of a moment from the film that I'm like looking back at and enjoying, but not for the reason that I thought I would. I thought it would be a cool, tense,
fun moment because it's like, it's been used so many times too.
Yeah, but it like came across to me as like hilarious, and the Batman kind of, or Bruce Wayne kind of came across as a nut job when I watched that scene in the context of the movie, not just a YouTube clip. So I was like, that is not how I thought I would enjoy that scene.
Yeah,
those are some of the standouts.
I also, Jack Nicholson. To just going back to him for a little bit, because that scene actually, I think that scene kind of showcases how he can be really good serious, and also he found a right balance to make that work. Because the scene right when he shoots Bruce Wayne, I thought that was cool and well done. And then and I also love how it's so dark, but you get the way he's delivering the lines to Vicky Vale, when he's basically trying to insinuate that maybe they were on a date at the museum. He's like, everything's going so well, and then you ran off. He like grabs her by the arm, and like, because he's so crazy and deranged that he thinks that she just like bolted, like, you know, they were on some date. And like, I think that was really funny and well done too. I think some of the campier things, like I think that the way that scene ends is really interesting too, where she opens the box and then the hand comes out with I guess it's like dead flowers that she faints.
That was very
it worked with the music, I guess. I mean,
I think that was drawing on some of like the 60s versions of Batman as like an Easter egg, if you will, or like a homage rather than a moment to be taken seriously. So I understood that while I was seeing it, but I was like, okay, give me a break.
But but also some of your problems too, I think, are legitimate. I mean, I'm just thinking about that Batcave scene again too, because like I think the dialogue between Vicky Vale and him is well written, but it doesn't have, there's no weight behind the words, because like there was no real investment in that relationship.
That's what I'm saying.
So when she says like to him, like, I just gotta know, are we gonna try to love each other? And he's like, and he's like, I would like to. I remember my buddy Justin, the first time we watched that movie together, because he saw this movie very late too.
Okay.
That's weird, because he's like a couple years younger than me, but he saw it late. And I remember after that line of dialogue where she says, are we gonna try to love each other? And there's like a pause, and he just like, did they only bang once?
Right. Like, why are they so invested?
I was like, yeah, I know. And he's like, that makes zero sense. Like,
that's what I'm saying. I think this was more common in the 80s when, you know, pre-internet, when there weren't as many options around to like the dating culture obviously is drastically different at the time this movie comes out. And that's how that's how I reconcile this relationship. It seems odd from our point of view now, but you know, this is just kind of how things were, not with everybody, but I have to rationalize that somehow, and that's how I decide to do it. I gotta say, the end of that scene when he departs, his follow-up line, the rate that you cut off from, was hilarious. I thought it was great. He goes, yeah, I'd like to, but I gotta go to work first, or something like that. I was like, I gotta go.
No, he said, I gotta go to work. So that's so funny, because like
I love that.
Like that line for a lot of people, and because it just cuts to like the opening of like where he keeps the suit and he like suits up again, he goes out, and you have that's like one shot of him just looking up. Like, a lot of people love that moment. I mean, based on that line and then that happening again, I mean, I can see a bunch of people just looking like silly otters, just clapping in the theaters, just like just so happy. Like, anytime something cool happened in the movie,
right?
But that's the thing. Like, we were talking about the whole nostalgia versus it being a good film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could ever call it a bad movie, because I
don't think that way either. I'm looking at it more of a Batman movie than I am just a standalone film. I love Tim Burton, love all his movies. Like, this would be one that I would say would be in the exception, but I'm not looking at it the way I'm looking at Beetlejuice or Sleepy Hollow. Like, it is part of a bigger, complex, like IP. So it's not all his movie. It's very much had an establishment before he was ever in the director's chair. That's why I don't really count it. But yeah,
I'd be curious to know what I'd be curious to know what you thought of Batman Returns, because like
I'm thinking that too.
To see it, because that is more of a Tim Burton movie through and through than Batman is.
Is Kim Basinger in it? Is Vicky Vale in it?
No, they Michelle Pfeiffer, Catwoman's in it, so that's the girl.
She's the love interest. Okay.
They do mention her. It just seems like she just couldn't deal with his duality. It's like a line that kind of gets dropped about where she might have gone. But that was a thing with the Batman movies beginning in '89 and ending with Batman and Robin. There's always a new girl in the movie. So like in Batman Returns, you have Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. Yeah. And Batman Forever, you had Nicole Kidman's like Dr. Chase Meridian. She was the new girl. Elle Macpherson was the new girl in Batman and Robin, but she barely had anything to do. But there was always like a new love interest of sorts.
Okay, well, as much as like I'm okay with that because I didn't care for the character of Vicky Vale, I also find that cheapens her role in this movie too, like that she's all gung ho for him just for it not to work out because of that as that throwaway line. I get that's not her fault, but it just kind of it's something that retroactively cheapens this movie if you're going to look at them the same. Anyway, I'm interested in seeing the second one. I feel like I would probably like it more, and I'm not opposed to. I'm not going to write off watching it by any means.
Now it does have the same problem as this movie, where Batman takes like almost third fiddle because there's two villains.
Who are the two in Return?
There's Penguin and Catwoman, so there's two villains that he has to like also compete with. And everyone who's worked with Tim Burton on these two movies have always said that he identified with the villains more than the hero.
I like that, honestly,
and that's why Batman does feel like he's a secondary character in his own movie. And like I said, that's something I didn't really pay attention to until I got way older. And it was just like, oh, yeah, I guess that is a problem. But also when I'm watching it for this, though, there's so many cool moments in the movie that it was distracting me from how I was feeling.
Hold up before you go any further, because I wanted to segue into ask you, like, obviously you've seen this movie several times. I don't think we addressed when you first saw it or how old you were, but I want to know that over time, your perspective with this watch notwithstanding, how does it hold up to you 35 years later? And what to you is still endearing about it that you are going to keep going back to it?
So allegedly I saw this in theaters as a kid when I was in '89. I don't remember it though. I would have been like 5 around then. So I don't remember.
I wouldn't have guessed you would have. So that's surprising.
I don't remember it. I do now. What's funny is that I actively remember seeing Batman Returns in theaters. That was like 92. So that's a little later. I do remember my mom buying me the VHS for Batman when I was there. It was I think it was a birthday gift or Christmas gift, and I wore that VHS out.
And
it was a movie I loved a lot as a kid and continued to love throughout my teens and all that too. Especially once we got like it took me a little bit to appreciate Batman Returns. I didn't really love that for a while, and then I don't even consider revisionist history. I think there's stuff to really appreciate about that movie now if you just accept that it's a Tim Burton movie first and the Batman movie second.
Okay. See, I felt the opposite about this one. I felt
like right. Yeah. Tim Burton movie. Yeah. So like it but I appreciated '89 so much more because even though I find things that are fun about Batman Forever, it's not as good as Returns or the '89 movie. I definitely don't like Batman and Robin. I know that movie has fans now. People are like, "Oh, it's so bad that it's good."
I couldn't bring myself to do
I don't have that kind of time to watch. I mean, I know there's a place for some movies that are so bad that they're fun.
Definitely.
I've never gotten to that place with Batman and Robin. My view of Batman '89 didn't change until after I saw Batman Begins. If you would have asked me up until 2005, I would have told you that Batman '89 was basically a perfect movie. That's how I viewed it. That's what I was seeing online on the 23rd on the anniversary day. That a lot of the love for it was mixed with a lot of nostalgia, which is fine. I mean, I think there's movies you grow up with, and hey, you might not understand it, but I think you would take a movie in differently if your childhood was defined by it.
Absolutely, no doubt about it.
So that makes it all, but that's why I wanted to watch it not with that attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of hard because there were certain scenes that I like, oh, that was so cool. And it reminded me of being a kid seeing it for the first time. It was, there's some images in the movie that someone actually posted a series of like 4K screenshots for the movie that and in his like thing said like, I know this movie is flawed, but it is giving me some of the best images of this character that I've ever seen across either comic books or all the movies. And that is why I can't deny how important it is to me though,
Mhm.
because it really
And you
because it defined that character for a lot of people who saw it. I mean, that was their signature Batman for a long time,
Mhm.
and I know a lot of people that are very much aware that narratively it's flawed, but they don't either want to admit it or they don't think that is enough for them that would dissuade them from not enjoying the movie. I can still enjoy the movie and find it flawed.
Absolutely.
It's very flawed. It's long too. I didn't realize until this one how long it was. I mean, it's a little over 2 hours, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But
I suppose it felt a little longer, but I wasn't burdened by that because I split it into 2 watches, so
yeah,
it wasn't that bad.
But like I enjoy it, but I what I do love even more though is learning about what this was like when it came out. Though I mean that so it's so crazy to think that we've had so many big movies before Batman '89. You had like Star Wars, you had Empire Strikes Back, you had Indiana Jones, you had E.T. There were so many big movies that seemed like they should have been the pinnacle on how to market movies like that. But everyone, almost any industry person you talk to, say it's this movie that defined how you sell these kind of films to the masses. Like I don't know what was different about those other bigger movies. I know for a lot of people, what they used to promote the film for the longest was just that image of the poster of the bat symbol. That was, I mean, that's been the poster forever. That's the key art. That is what they put out there for. It was more than like, let's not just slap the cast on the poster. Like
poster.
That's and they said, and everyone said in '89 that Batman symbol was everywhere. People were, I guess, stealing it out of like where like bus stops and stuff. They were like taking them out of the places that they had them there, like stealing them, so they had to keep replacing them. They said Batman merchandise sold out like incredibly fast, even before the movie came out, and they weren't making enough of it to like get out to people. And they said the movie had its premiere in Westwood on a Monday. People started camping out on the Wednesday to watch it on Friday, and it was a pure big event. I mean, it was the movie of that summer. It was the movie of that summer, and honestly, they said a learning curve for other studios on how to market their movies like that. Now it got mixed reviews too. I mean, we're not the only. I mean, I feel like I'm co-signing on some of the negative stuff that you said about it, as if I don't like. I'm sure by the end when we give scores, I will probably give it a better score than you.
I'm under the impression that you are a big fan of the movie, but it's good that you can.
But I'm actually
a critical lens too,
right? But I'm actually hyper aware of what doesn't work about it, and.
Sometimes it just doesn't matter to you like you said, define your childhood. I look back at movies that I know, first time viewers are probably not going to eat up, that I just don't care and I'll defend till the death. And that's completely fine. That's half the fun of loving movies.
Yeah. And that's, and it's cool to have movies like that 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 you watch them when you're young. But I think it's also important to have like that critical lens is important too. I can't just blindly like something because like I loved it as a 5-year-old, and and it's crazy too because we like a lot of the anniversaries we cover that I've attached nostalgia to some of those movies.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was different. I wanted to kind of like because that is a big reason why people I think love it, and even if they don't want to admit it, I think that has a lot to do with their love of this movie. Is they were young when they saw it. They saw it in 1989,
right?
They even saw it before the Nolan movies. I think if I was to ask a big group of people who were like you, who saw the Nolan movies first and saw this second, they would feel kind of like you do.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
And I wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly.
So whether people agree with me or not, I think all three of those movies. I will say Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and even The Dark Knight Rises. All of them, I think, are better films than this movie as a film.
Mm-hmm.
But I won't deny that this movie isn't purely entertaining and it was fun, and it is what it is.
Totally, absolutely. I'm sure we are now headed towards a time where audiences will be forced to answer the question between Matt Reeves' Batverse and Nolan's.
That's so true. And I know you mentioned his movie before, and I keep forgetting to mention Matt Reeves' The Batman, but that's another, I guess, example of doing that character justice a bit. I mean, you actually get a sense of him being a detective in that movie,
more so than any other interpretation, I would argue.
You definitely don't get it here at all, really.
That's fine.
But yeah, there's just some fun cool. I also love that the action scenes in this movie are mostly just hand-to-hand stuff. It's not like it wasn't too exaggerated. I mean, this was a time where most of the stuff was practical anyway.
Right.
So I did enjoy that, and that the action was more practical. I mean, that's why I love the stuff that happens after the museum scene, because like that whole chase with the Batmobile, and there is an issue. My friend Kayla, when she first saw this movie, when she watched it with me, she did like some of the lines that were directed towards Vicky Vale.
Did or didn't?
Didn't. I think it's when he asked her how much does she weigh, and she's
I thought that was
108.
Poor taste. And then he mentions because I think
when she gets back down, I was like, that's what I mean.
Funny, guy-oriented joke for the time. I found it, and I thought it was funny, but it was a weird kind of out of taste or poor taste. Anyway, whatever. Funny moment, but
I will say, like, some of my, I even agree with that guy. I think some of the best images from movies I think come from here. I mean, that whole it's after the museum stuff, and they get back in the Batmobile and they're driving back to the Batcave. The cinematography on that scene is amazing. It's like they're just driving through, and like all the leaves are like flying everywhere because the car is going so fast, and the music is like hitting really hard during that scene. Like, there's a lot of cool imagery and like stuff in the movie, and I could see why people were like super excited. Apparently, they released, to calm everyone down before the movie came out, they cut like a 30-second teaser for the movie, and a lot in that teaser, a lot of images, but like not really telling you what the movie's story was about. And that's what sold a lot of people on, like, all right, that's what they're going to make it look like. It's dark. It's not Adam West's Batman. This is like exactly what we wanted.
Right.
So I think they did a good job for the most part of like at least giving fans the dark Batman character that they wanted, and giving them the dark Batman film that they wanted. And whether or not they were totally successful, that'll just depend on the viewer and when they saw it.
I think at the time they definitely succeeded. I think obviously time has, as we've evolved and the characters evolved, we've seen more. I think there was darker Batman versions to be had that Nolan and then later Reeves brought out in us. But I think for that time, it hit the tone that Batman needed on the head. And so, applause is due for the crew for accomplishing that without a doubt.
And just to put in perspective about the merchandising, because I brought it up earlier, they said $750 million worth of merchandise was sold leading up and past the summer of '89 for this movie. And
crazy.
I guess this is so how different times work. When they opened in late night previews on June 22nd, it made $2.2 million, which was a record at the time. So like it's weird because like movies make crazy amount of previews now. And then it grossed $40.49 million on its opening weekend, which it broke the opening weekend record held by Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade for that film. And it opened ahead of Ghostbusters 2, which was expected to be the biggest movie of the summer and not Batman. But Batman was. By the end of it, the movie made $411 million worldwide on a $48 million budget. And at the time, the $48 million budget was one of the biggest ones that Warner Brothers had.
Wow.
So, yeah. So it was a huge financial success, and it made $150 million in home video sales as well when it came out on home video. So it was a huge big deal. And also, it opened the same weekend as Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which also did well. So did counter programming for kids when that came out. It has a 76% rating on Rotten Tomatoes as fresh. Now, we brought this up before about the Rotten Tomatoes scores and all that. And if you think it's cool for people to retroactively review movies, which will either bump up a score or bring down the score.
Right.
A lot of the score for Batman, the score has gone up a little bit over the years, and I think that has a lot to do with nostalgia, people reviewing it and then talking about how much they love it. Whether or not you think that's fair,
I don't know how I feel about that.
But yeah, and then the critic stuff kind of goes along with what you were saying. Media observed that Burton was more interested in the Joker and the art and set production design than Batman or anything else in terms of characterization and screen time. They said, the comic book fans did react a little bit negatively to Joker murdering Bruce Wayne's parents because it's Joe Chill in the comic books as well. Some people thought the Prince songs were too out of place, while others thought that it fit the character of the Joker a bit. And Burton said he had no issues with the Prince songs. but he was less enthusiastic about how they were used in the film. He didn't want to use as many, but they wanted him to use more. Blah, blah, blah. Roger Ebert gave the movie 2.5 stars out of 4, was highly impressed with the production and design, but claimed Batman is a triumph of design over story, style, or substance. A great looking movie with a plot you can't care much about. He also called the film a depressing experience. And on the syndicated television series Siskel and Ebert, his reviewing partner Gene Siskel actually disagreed, describing the film as having a refreshingly adult approach with performance, direction, and set design that draws you into a psychological world as well.
Okay, I agree a little bit with Siskel there for sure. I still don't forgive Roger Ebert for liking this movie more than Dead Poets Society. That's so beyond me, especially considering the movies that he loves. I'm just like, what? That's so backwards, but oh well. So all this being said now, what do you personally rate this movie?
It's gonna be a hard part. Like I have to rate it.
Speak your mind. What do you truly?
Well, it's like it's like the critical, and like on Letterboxd, you can't give like a critical lens score and a nostalgia score. So I can't.
I wish you could though. That's a flaw.
Because like I always feel like I'm gonna upset other Batman fans. Yeah, I do like them because they do like the movie. I mean, I wouldn't have if someone was like, "Yo, let's watch Batman '89." Like a month from now, I would watch it with them. So it has for me a lot of repeat value in it.
And that's important.
If you were asking me like years ago, I probably would have given it a 4.
Okay.
I can't give it anything below a 3.5, so I'll settle at 3.5 for it.
If you want to give it a 4, gays, you can give it a 4.
No, no, because like I'm rating it as a film,
right,
and not something as not something.
See, that's something I struggle with sometimes. Sometimes I will give sympathy.
And honestly, I knew this was gonna be hard. Like this was after the movie was over, I was like, all right, think about what you're gonna give it, but don't give it like a 4 because it's like, oh, there's so many cool moments in it. Like as a film, it like, hey, I think a lot. I think you could, if you looked online, you could find a few people that think the movie is flawed and it has like issues and stuff.
I had to seek those reviews out to kind of validate and put into words how I was feeling a little bit. So I think it's important to read both and see, like sometimes people bring up points you didn't consider. And I'm like, oh shit. Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes those just roll in one ear and out the other and I don't care. But a lot of times in negative or positive reviews, if you're looking at stuff that's the opposite of how you feel, I think there's a lot of perspective to be learned there. And sometimes it's like, whatever, I like this movie. I don't really need to know what anyone else thought about it. I'm going to spew my thoughts now onto the podcast. And I kind of have a different approach with every movie.
Yep. So are you ready to make Merc cry with your score?
If you were to stop listening to the episode right here, I wouldn't judge you, but I've been kind of tossing up numbers throughout the episode in my head, and I think I've settled on a 2 out of 5 if we're going by Letterboxd, and that is encapsulating my enjoyment and the rewatchability this movie has for me. And again, I don't even think it's like a poorly made movie. Again, I'm looking at this as like what I know the Batman character to be and how my own expectations kind of were or were not reflected in this movie. So it's kind of encompassing everything, and that's the score I've settled on. I wouldn't rule out watching it again, but I'll put some time in between this. I gotta say, buzzed to watch 92's Batman Returns. So I even really want to watch Val Kilmer's one, whatever that one was called.
It's Batman Forever. It's Batman fun. Forever. Yeah, it's definitely more kid friendly than like Returns and Batman. But it's not. It doesn't quite go as far as Batman and Robin. It's like in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. Yeah, because like with Batman Returns, it got really dark and then parents complained and then all right, we got to lighten it up because we want to also sell toys.
Yeah. I'd be curious if Nolan's movies had any impact on merchandise sales for children, because that was all the rage. I was 7 years old when that movie came out, and I was, everyone my age was all about it. But I think time and society had changed in the subsequent decades. So,
but I do respect that that you were completely and totally honest about your opinion of it, because you could have been like,
I'm glad.
I'm pretty sure that. Because I think you are aware about how much people love it, and
certainly.
And you were honest in the beginning that you tried to watch it like as like, oh, like imagine what this was like in 1989.
Yes,
and that is hard, I think, to do.
Yeah. Similar struggle that you had with taking off the nostalgia goggles. It's almost kind of impossible. As long as you're acknowledging you're trying, I think goes a long way.
But I would have honestly, just based on what people say about it, I would have loved to. I mean, I know apparently I saw this when I was 5. I don't remember seeing it in theaters. So I wish I could have been fully aware of what was going on that summer, because it seems like it was still like just a fun experience to have that movie be as popular as it was.
No doubt.
It kind
of, at least you can say you were there
did,
during the time.
Yeah, I guess it did kind of unify that fan base a bit. And I'm trying to think of what we have now that would compare. I mean, I know Avengers Endgame was like a really big deal for a lot of people in theaters, and that was a collective experience for
good comparison.
So many people. And I guess that's the closest I would have to how this is described to me.
To put that in perspective, like that is pretty crazy, because the hype for Endgame was next level. Nothing that I'd experienced until the time that movie came out, or since.
Yeah.
So that puts things in. That's a great comparison. If they were similar, then that lends me this perspective of how big that movie would have been in '89.
Yeah, and I think no matter what score we give it, or anyone else gives it, whether they really love it or they are in the middle, or if they don't like it, I think what can't be denied though is the impact it had on the industry, and
without a doubt,
for comic book movies, for summer blockbusters. I mean, this comes out when summer blockbusters are huge. It's a big deal to have like a big event movie. You can't take that away. And like people, like I said, industry people they say they still have meetings about like, all right, how do we do this like Batman? And that was and that was 35 years ago. So sometimes maybe the cultural impact of a movie is just as important as it being a good film too.
Without a doubt.
That's also there as well. But I'm glad we got to talk about it. Glad we finally got it out of the way.
Yeah.
It's been a big elephant in the room for forever long. You've been on here over a year.
That's right. More like a year and a half. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's can no longer hold that against me now. So I've now seen 89 now. So don't be jealous of me, because I now have to have this conversation with Cam, who I imagine will be a little disappointed.
Yeah,
he likes this movie a lot. I think he's more Nolan Batverse lover, like more in line with me, but he definitely appreciates this movie a lot and for what it did, and is a fan of it. And so I will maybe sugarcoat a bit.
It would be interesting if you watched it with him.
I wonder if his enjoyment would sway me. That is probably the case. Maybe I'm so critical of it because I watched it alone and just maybe I wasn't in the mood for it. So who knows what a future revisit might look like, or if I watch it with company. You never know that. I strongly believe that will impact your view of a film. So maybe I'm not looking forward to it though. Let's just put it that way. I might sugarcoat. I don't know. We'll see.
You're just gonna break your best friend's heart.
Anyway, I hope America's alive over there.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we finally got it out, and that's it, I think. And we have one more anniversary for you this month, which is Alien.
Nope. We got two. We got Spider-Man 2.
Oh, you're right. Forgot about Spider-Man.
That's right.
Forgot about. Oh God. Well, because July's almost here and June's almost over. My bad. So we have two more.
That's right. Sorry. Gotta bang those out quick. I know it'll probably be after June by the time they come out, but
I know. I think Spider-Man 2 will be up first, and then we'll do Alien.
Okay. Good to know. Alien's not necessarily a priority.
Or maybe you want Alien first. I don't know if you want to do two back-to-back comic book movies, but
that's fine with me. I mean, the closer I get that watch into Romulus, the better. But it is the audience's pick, right? We do gotta you gotta show some urgency, but I'm sure we can get them out, quite close together. But in any case, those are coming at you guys soon. Our last anniversary picks for the month of June, and that means, of course, as we wind closer to July, we'll have some more movies for you to vote on our socials. So we'll have our July. We haven't even gone over our July picks yet, so not sure what the options are going to be. That is our homework until next episode. So looking forward to see. I actually haven't even glimpsed far ahead enough to see what our options are, so that's always a treat.
There's some goodies on there.
We're getting into the summer. I mean,
there's some good ones there. Not as hard at least for me as June was, because June was difficult. There's some June ones I was like, I wish we had done those. But yeah, and I also want to say, just before you wrap it up, is that this is episode 180. So we are very close, relatively close to 200.
Closer than we think, probably.
So we are also actively thinking about what to kind of do for that. And I think since we're 20 away, it'll be a good time to throw on socials asking you guys like what we should do. For the 200th episode. Because like you said, it'll be here before we know it. And would love to have everyone that listens involved in that somehow. letting us know like what we should do. So yeah, this is like our official countdown, I guess, to 200 since we're 20 away from that.
I mean, that sounds like a good benchmark to start counting down from, because the rate that we're releasing episodes, it'll come a lot sooner. I know we had the same feeling when we were approaching 100. We couldn't believe how fast it had come. So at least for those of you that maybe don't catch every episode, stay tuned to the socials where we'll have some more interactive stuff. We want to know what you guys want to see for the episode. And I imagine Gaius will probably have some questions to read from the audience on our episode, as is customary for our big episode. So excited to see what you guys have to say, or what questions you have for us. And of course, on that note too, don't ever be afraid to go leave us a review wherever you guys listen to the show. And without further ado, as Gaius mentioned, this is episode 180 of Back to the Blockbuster. Great conversation about Batman 1989, as it is known colloquially. Glad to have had this episode out, regardless of how we feel about it. It always made for a great conversation, and now there's a huge weight off my chest. Now I'll just be checking the DMs and seeing what Merc has to say after he listens to the episode. But if you guys liked it, the episode you guys heard today, guys, we've got 179 other episodes backlogged for you guys to check out. Of course, we are available wherever you guys can find a podcast, and are most recently active on YouTube. So check out the page there if you want to see our handsome mugs. Thanks as always for sticking around, guys, and listening to us week after week. We really appreciate your support for the show. And of course, playlists, a big shout out for you guys too, and all you do for Back to the Blockbuster. Until then, Gaius, thank you for the stimulating conversation, and happy to chat our next 2 anniversary episodes in the following weeks. Catch you later, guys.
Peace.